The monitor went flat. One long, merciless line, and an 8-year-old girl crushed my sleeve and whispered, "Please don't take her." 3 years after I buried my wife, I swore I'd never stand in that sound again. I was wrong, because that night I learned some promises only matter when you break them. It started in an alley that smelled like rain trash, old cardboard, the sort of place people angle their eyes away from so they can feel good about making it home on time. I was in a black coat with a calendar so full there wasn't room for air, the way you live when grief teaches you how to keep moving so nothing catches up. A stray cat hissed and shot past a dented trash can, and from the darkest slice of that alley, a girl stepped into the weak light, cradling a bundle wrapped in a thin blue scarf. She had those tough eyes kids get when the world won't behave. 8, maybe, chin set like concrete. She looked up at me and said, "Sir, please can you help me bury my sister?" Time tilted. You know that feeling when your brain runs but your body forgets how to move? Yeah, that happened. I heard my voice come out too loud for a narrow alley asking where her parents were. She swallowed and said her name was Lily, that her dad had vanished, that her mom went looking for food 2 days ago and never came back. People walk on the dead here, she added, honest, the way only children can be. Then she loosened the edge of that blue scarf just a little, and there it was. The tiniest face I've ever seen, gray at the lips, chest, fluttering like a fish, trying to breathe on a dock. Not gone. Not yet. I've signed steel and glass deals in 5 minutes flat. But my hands shook like a rookie when I reached out. I touched that baby's chest and felt a stuttering breath, a fragile, stubborn little kick, and my own heart answered like a horse. "She's breathing," I said, and hearing myself say, it lit up something behind my ribs I thought was dead. "She's not gone. She needs a hospital now." Lily blinked fast and told me the hospital asks for money first, that a man had told her to go away. "Not tonight," I said. "Not you." I wrapped my coat around both girls, slid an arm under the baby, and said the only thing I was sure of. "Don't let go of my sleeve." We're going. We ran. Water splashed up cold and dirty, a siren howled somewhere far away, and then, like most sirens, passed on to somebody else's emergency. My driver, Paul, had my car at the mouth of the alley. Backseat down, I said that tone people obey in boardrooms and alleys both. We slid in. Streetlights strobed the baby's face with gold and shadow, while I counted the distance between breaths and rubbed 2 fingers over her tiny sternum, like the motion could remind her how to stay. "Talk to her," I told Lily. "Tell her something she knows." Lily nodded like a soldier, leaned close, and whispered about a blue cup they shared when it rained, how she saved the first sip for the baby, how she didn't drink the rainwater because Hope, that was the baby's name, liked the first taste. I said it out loud on purpose. Hope, like the air might recognize it and behave. We hit the hospital doors at a run. If you've never watched a good ER team snap from still to sprint, it looks like wind grabbing a field. "Code Blue Infant Room 3, someone called. A doctor met us at the door. Warm hands, clear eyes, name tag reading Dr. Allen. And he took Hope with a calm that said he had wrestled with nights like this and didn't plan on losing. Mask warm blankets, glucose check a smaller mask, a heater the size of a lunchbox. Orders quiet and quick. He asked if I was the father. "I'm the one who brought her in," I said. "I'll sign whatever it takes and I'll pay for all of it." That's when social services arrived. Gray blazer, steady face badge, clipped like a boundary line. "I'm Ms. Turner," she said, voice even. "Money helps Mr. Price, but the law needs to know who has custody." She didn't flinch when I said my name. She just waited. I told her what mattered. A little girl was about to break in half. If we separated her from the baby, she thinks she already lost. Could we make an exception for tonight? Supervised, visible by the NICU window. I would sit right there and be the easiest case she'd ever had. You ever watch a person measure you like a jeweler checks a stone? She did that, then nodded once. One night with supervision, she said. You don't leave with her. You don't argue the rules. Understood, I told her, and I meant it. I had never been more willing to be watched. They placed Hope under a bright lamp, taped a tiny sensor to her foot. Through the NICU glass, the world looked curved and small like a snow globe with alarms. Lily pressed her palm to the glass and hummed a tune that wasn't a song so much as a promise. Slow, thin, careful, the Blue Cup song. The monitor, that stubborn little metronome, went from slow and wandering to slow and steady. Sometimes the smallest hearts fight hardest when they hear a familiar voice. The night nurse, Carla, said with a smile I didn't know how much I needed. Pattern interrupt. Quick reality check. If this already has your chest tight, hit like so it finds the next person who needs it. Drop your city in the comments, and I'll shout some of you out next time. And tell me this honestly, if it were you, would you have stopped in that alley or kept walking? Hospitals at night stretch time like gum. Thin, sticky, still somehow hanging together. I texted my office, clear my morning urgent family business. Not the kind that lives on spreadsheets. The kind that shows up with rain in her hair. Ms. Turner spoke to Lily in that careful, soft way social workers learn to keep from falling apart on the job. Where do you sleep? Any adults watching you? Did you go to school? Lily talked about a dry spot by a broken step near an old bakery, about a woman named June who shared bread last week, about Tuesdays on church steps, and a biscuit someone kind handed out. The words landed like cold stones. Then the air changed. Don't ask me how I knew, I just did. Ms. Turner's tablet chimed. A hospital security officer stepped into the hall, posture that says mistakes will get expensive. He told us there was a missing person alert matching Lily filed last month in another city. Neighbor reported neglect, possible endangerment. Words that bruise even when you say them gentle. Lily's mouth fell open. We're not bad, she whispered. We just got left. The elevator dinged. Doors slid open. A woman stepped out in a storm of shaking and cracked lips and fear, scarf half-off eyes scraping the room like they were looking for forgiveness. And behind her came a tall man with a chain around his neck and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The woman saw the NICU window and folded, saying, Hope, oh God, and grabbing the doorframe like it might save her. The man scanned faces, then locked on Lily like a hawk. There she is, he said, voice low and too calm. The older one. She runs fast. Ms. Turner moved in front of Lily. The officer stepped closer, hand near his radio. Nurses paused mid-motion. The hallway temperature dropped 10 degrees. The man looked me up and down like a price tag. You got money, he said. Good. Nothing leaves this floor until we get what's owed. Debt for a child. Then the monitor screamed. If you've heard a flat line in a room where you love someone, even for a second, you know the way it cuts. I was inside before I knew I'd moved. Dr. Allen's voice was steady like a path compressions. Epi ready. Warming stays on. Tiny pads, tiny chest. Charge. Clear. The body jerked, the line flickered, fell flat. Charge. Clear. Another stolen second. Then beep. Beep. Faint, fragile, but undeniable. The nurse's shoulders dropped, then squared again. Even the officer in the doorway looked away and pretended his radio needed him so nobody would see his eyes. I turned back into the hall and faced the man with the chain. "You don't own anyone," I told him. Not loud, not shaky, the kind of calm that can break glass. "You're done." He smirked. Big words, rich man. Backup took their mark like they'd been practicing on a chalkboard. Quick, clean, professional. And the cuffs clicked. It's funny how loud cuffs can be when a room needs punctuation. He spit something about regret and not knowing what's coming, and they hauled him out. The woman crumpled. Elena, she said her name was. Apologizing and sobbing and trying to gather a life you could tell had been blown apart by a series of men who never learned the difference between power and cruelty. Ms. Turner stayed human. Firm, clear hands busy with forms that meant food and safety instead of fines and court dates. Elena spoke through shaking. The man extorted her, took their food cards, threatened to take Lily, followed her to the ER when she came to beg for help. I told Ms. Turner I had a secure suite near the hospital, a nurse who could stay, that social services could supervise, that I didn't want them in a cold shelter when they'd already had too much cold. She studied me, that jeweler's gaze again, then nodded. Dr. Allen said Hope would need continued care, but family support would help. Purpose. That was the word that finally fit in the space grief had chewed out. Not relief, not victory, just purpose. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. Days stitched themselves together with small, stubborn threads. Mornings where the blinds turned thin light into calm nights, where the vending machine hummed like an old friend. Carla taught me how to read a neonatal monitor without panicking at every dip. Lily pressed her palm to the NICU glass and hummed while Hope's heart learned a steadier rhythm. Ms. Turner turned paperwork into a plan that looked like stability instead of punishment. Elena met with a counselor and came back with eyes that looked a little less hunted each time. I learned to sit still again, not in the way grief had forced me to, but in a way that felt like paying attention. One evening, Detective Monroe stopped by in a jacket that had seen enough rain to earn opinions. "He thanked us for calling things in fast," said Tony. That was the chain man. "Had priors for extortion and assault, said the hospital break-in meant no bail." He also said something else that made my stomach tilt. That a missing person alert didn't mean a bad mother. It meant a messy story, and we'd let the process untangle it. I appreciated that. Mercy and paperwork don't often share a table. Hope gained weight. We moved to the suite I'd set up. Clean sheets, a soft chair, a window that let you pretend the city wasn't always hungry. Lily touched the bed like it might vanish. "This for us, for now," I said, "until Hope is strong." And then what she asked, because kids who've lived outside know how to read horizons. "We'll see," I said, which is the most honest sentence in the English language when your heart is ahead of your plan. We found a rhythm. Elena hummed the Blue Cup song in a quieter voice that still carried. Lily held the bottle sometimes and whispered, "You're safe like a spell." I sat by the window counting breaths, because it felt like prayer even if I didn't know how to pray anymore. Dr. Allen told me you've made more difference than any donation check, and I did the small laugh rich people do when they realize money wasn't the interesting part of their story after all. You know what I mean. Then came the twist, the part where I realized none of this was an accident. Detective Monroe called me downtown. Rain threatened again. This city loves a callback. And he had a manila envelope on his desk with my name on it. "We pulled this from Tony's stuff," he said. Inside a birth certificate that didn't make sense and a note with handwriting that put knives in the loops. The certificate listed a guardian name filed days after a chaotic night at a hospital across town, a night I knew too well from another angle. The guardian name was my late wife's, Hannah Price. I felt the floor tilt. That's impossible, I said, because sometimes your mouth tries to protect your heart. Monroe had already done the homework. The filing was irregular, posthumous. Someone used Hannah's identity to anchor a newborn who might have vanished into paperless nowhere. He pressed his lips together like a man who knows a secret isn't finished, and said there was also a short message video on Tony's phone. The man sneering into the camera telling me I didn't just stumble into that alley, telling me to ask my wife's doctor what happened the night she died. I drove to the old hospital like the rain owed me a favor. The place looked tired, paint peeling, light flickering. But the apartment in the back still had a brass plate that said, Dr. Samuel Harvey. He opened the door, older and thinner eyes still sharp. He remembered me, and when I asked about that night, he sat down like the chair was part confession, part anchor. He told me 2 women were in crisis that night. My wife Hannah and a young mother brought in battered and bleeding. He told me Hannah worsened despite everything, that before she passed, she told a nurse if the baby makes it, call her Hope. He told me the other woman delivered early, that the child wasn't breathing at first, that they revived her, that the mother refused to take the baby because she genuinely believed she couldn't keep her alive, that a nurse filed emergency guardianship under the only name at hand with the authority and the heart, Hannah's, to keep the child from vanishing. It wasn't clean, he said, but it kept her alive. The young mother's name was Elena. I sat with that like a weight I wanted to carry and couldn't set down. My wife, in the last hours of her life, had thrown a lifeline across years to a child I would find in a rain-soaked alley, to a girl who would grab my sleeve and refuse to let go. You can call it coincidence. You can call it providence. I just call it Hannah. The baby had a name before I ever said it out loud. Hope. I drove back to the suite to find Lily teaching Hope to clap Elena, trying to laugh without crying, Carla adjusting a monitor and pretending not to notice how tired my face had become. I stood in the doorway and listened to Elena hum the Blue Cup song, the same cadence, the same promise, and for the first time in 3 years, Hannah's name didn't feel like a knife in my mouth. It felt like a light left on in a house I thought was empty. Here's where I ask you something that will probably split the comments right down the middle, because this is bigger than one good night and a generous bank account. Was any of this fair? The hospital made exceptions because I pushed, respectfully on paper supervised, but pushed all the same. Social services bent a process because a child at a window needed her sister's voice more than the rules needed to feel tidy. Would those doors have opened for Elena and Lily if I hadn't been the man on the other side? If it were you writing policy instead of comments, would you allow exceptions like this or lock the rules tighter so nobody has an unfair advantage? Do you think that's fair? Tell me what fairness looks like when money is in the room and so is mercy. I won't pretend the world turned perfect after that. Tony stayed in custody, but men like him don't act alone. Detective Monroe kept tugging at threads uglier than one hallway can hold. Ms. Turner kept showing up with forms and real questions and patient eyes. Elena worked through therapy that didn't fix everything, but finally gave words to knots that had just been pain before. Lily learned how to sleep without shoes on. Hope learned how to breathe without an audience counting along. And me, I learned how to sit in a room with my wife's name and not feel like I had to apologize for surviving. One night I stood by the window after everyone else was asleep and whispered, "You did it, Hannah," because it felt true. Like she had dragged a line of meaning across a gap I didn't know how to cross. Maybe love isn't about the buildings you make stand tall on a skyline. Maybe it's about the small lives you keep from falling through every crack. Maybe the point of all the steel I built was to learn how to hold something softer and not let go. So here's where I leave you. Not with a bow because life isn't a gift bag, but with a real question and a dare. The question, what should a system do when compassion is faster than paperwork? Should an 8-year-old be allowed to hum at a NICU window because a man with a famous name promised not to move? Or should we make sure that any kid, with or without a millionaire in the hallway, gets the same yes? If you write the rule, what does it say? And the dare tell the truth like Lily did. If you were in that alley, would you have stopped? If you were Ms. Turner, would you have allowed the exception? If you were me, would you have opened your wallet, your mouth, your life? You know what I mean. If this story meant something to you, like the video so the algorithm doesn't walk past it. Subscribe if you want more true stories told by someone still learning how to be human, and drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what I got wrong, what I got right, what you would have done differently. If you've got a blue cup story, the promise you kept when nobody else believed you could, share it because somebody scrolling at 2 a.m. might find your words and hang on. And hey, stick around, because the next chapter isn't the end of a fight, it's the start of a better rule.